How do you spell it? Okay, hey, that's a good question. I'm going to type that in the chat for you. Forensics, forensics. So y'all think about it, okay? I mean, you probably have seen some things on TV, some of the Forensic Files episode. Recently, Miss Porter says scientific test. Okay, now, whenever I first taught this, 2018, my students got to a point where they started saying things like, it's another science class. Okay, and in a sense, it kind of is. It takes on a more of a science role than I guess most of your other classes would, but it's not just strictly based off of science, but there will most definitely be scientific tests that we do. Yes, Miss Porter, and Ms. Ziegler says is it like action? Okay, there is most definitely a lot of action involved. Okay, but that's only 2 or 3 people that have let me know that they are attempting to guess what forensics are. So all you other people, I need you to let me know something. If you don't know what forensics are, say IDK or I don't know. And if you think you know what they are, tell me what you think it is. I'll give you about 30 more seconds. Okay? Oh, hey, that's part of it. That's what I'm here for.
Mr. What?
Yes, go ahead.
Is it like the action of one that's doing a scientific test?
Well, not necessarily. Okay, it unfortunately it has a little darker meaning. Okay, but now that I've given a few other people a chance to guess, I'll just go ahead and tell y'all. Okay, the definition for forensics is literally the application of science to the law. Okay, and that means basically that we're using scientific method, the scientific study, to determine bits and pieces left behind from a crime or a crime scene. And we're literally taking those things from the story and putting those pieces back together. Okay, so it's the application of science to law or the criminal justice system. Okay, and that's important because we live in the United States of America. So are arrested or have to deal with the law in any kind of way, you're never automatically assumed guilty. Okay, that's why they say you are innocent until you are proven guilty. So they have to prove the fact that you were there at the scene of the crime, you committed the murder, and there's many ways that they can do that. Okay, so at this time, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let y'all PowerPoint. Now remember, please do not write every single thing on this PowerPoint. I will tell you very specifically what I want you to write about this. All right, so y'all type in the chat for me if you're able to see the first slide of my crime scene basics PowerPoint here. All right, Ms. Porter says she can. Thank you. All right, thank y'all. Thank you. All right, so good. We're going to assume that everybody can now. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing that this unit starts out on is just some basic content vocabulary. Okay, y'all give me a second to add someone to the class. So we're going to start out our unit with just some basic vocab, okay? Yes, Ms. Ziegler, that is absolutely correct. And type in the chat where you've heard that for me. Okay, so the first vocab term that you have is crime scene, okay? And that is literally any physical location in which a crime has occurred or is thought of having occurred. Oh, that's fine. No worries. You're good. Miss New. That's what I was saying. You're in perfect timing. We're just now getting started. Movies and elsewhere. Yeah. So TV shows, movies. I'm sure you have all heard that line at least a couple of times. Um, anything you say can or will be used against you in the court of law. That's most definitely true. Okay. If you are, let's say that you're intoxicated in the back of a cop car and you admit to the murder of somebody, well, then, yeah, you might have been intoxicated when you said that, but you still said that. So, therefore, that's going to send out some red flags, and they're probably going to do some digging in on that case. Okay. So, in the meantime, I'm going to roll on through with the PowerPoint. Okay. Miss Owens is going to be monitoring the chat for me. So, if y'all have anything to say or want me to stop and repeat something, just let us know in that chat, please. I'm going to go ahead and get back to the crime scene vocab. Okay, so a crime scene, once again, is the physical location where the crime has occurred or was thought of having occurred. Okay, and there's two subsets for that. Okay, the first is the primary crime scene, which is the original location of the crime or accident. Alternate location where other evidence could be found. Okay, so say for instance, at the primary crime scene, we find a knife that's bloody, and we find some clothing that's been ripped and torn, but that's it. That's all we find. Okay, so that's going to be the primary crime scene. That's the first place that we know about. Okay, but say that 2 miles down the road, once the investigation starts happening, that, well, then bingo, that's going to become a secondary crime scene because not only was more evidence found there, but now we know for sure that um, we have a victim, okay? Somebody that was murdered or robbed or whatever the case might be. All right, moving on. So just know that there's two types of crime scenes, the primary and the secondary. This is an important term, okay? The suspect, okay? That's the person thought to be capable of committing a crime. If you are ever suspected of doing something, then that just means that the chances are likely that you did it or people think that you might have done it, okay? That you're capable of doing that. Okay, an accomplice, a person that's associated with someone suspected of committing a crime. Okay, so a perfect example of an accomplice would be a lookout or a getaway driver. If somebody was going to rob a bank, the person that goes inside the bank and gets the money, whenever they come outside, and that getaway driver is going to get them out of there before the cops get there. Well, that getaway driver is just as guilty in that crime as the man that actually went into the bank, wielding a gun and everything. So that's his accomplice in that crime. He's going to get just as much time as the other person did. And the other term on this page is alibi. Okay, that's the statement of where a suspect was at the time of a crime. Let me admit someone to the class real quick, and I want to touch on this for just a second. Okay, so an alibi, okay? An alibi is your story. It's your side of the story, and it's what saves your butt whenever things really start getting heated, and especially in the court system. Okay, so your alibi is your statement of where you were at the time of a crime. Okay, so you have to have proof that you were, say that you went out to dinner last night at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. You've got witnesses that were there with you that can vouch for you and say that, yeah, he or she was here with me at O'Charlie's from 7 to 9. There's no way they could have been there's no way they could have broken into the school. They were with us having dinner last night. Okay, so the alibi is your statement of who, what, where, when, and it's what saves you and gets you out of trouble. Okay, if you don't have a good alibi, it just sends up red flags, and it's going to give the investigators leads and places to go further. Anybody got any questions so far? I'm going to move on. All right, moving on. Okay. Now, I would like for you to write these three types of evidence down. Okay, you don't have to actually write out the whole definition as well, but I want you to write the three types of evidence are testimonial, comma, physical, and trace evidence. Okay, that's the first note I want you to have. The three types of evidence are testimonial, physical, and trace evidence. Okay, while you're doing that, I'm gonna look in the chat real quick. Oh, you got it, Miss Owens? Okay, very nice. Miss Ziegler, you're right. A lot of the times they do because they are caught in a lie. So they're like, uh-oh, I'm gonna have to. Okay. So while y'all are writing down the three types of evidence, I'm going to explain to you what the three types of evidence are. Okay, go ahead, Miss New. You're fine. So the first type of evidence is called testimonial, okay? And a lot of you have probably heard a word very similar to that. That is testimony, okay? And it's just, and testimonial evidence includes oral or written statements that's given to police officers as well as the court testimony and by people who witnessed an event. Okay, so say that a crime occurred and the cops were called and they came out to do an investigation. Okay, well, if you're a neighbor, they might come to your house and say, hey, did you hear or see anything out of the ordinary? And obviously, if you did, then you would want to explain to the officer what you saw. Okay, and that is your or your written statement. Okay, it's just what you saw. Um, Whenever they call for witnesses, okay, they have to give their side of the story, especially if this was an accident, okay, a car accident, and there were two vehicles involved. Well, a lot of the times these people aren't honest, okay, so what they have to do is go for a third party, somebody else that wasn't involved in the car accident, but perhaps saw what happened. Okay. And they might say that the blue car, that person was texting and driving, whereas the person in the red car was just sitting there at the red light waiting for the light to change whenever the blue car came. And because the girl was texting and driving, she rear ended the car. Okay. That's just an example. Okay. That's just one example out of many that is, but testimonial evidence, in other words, is the oral or written statements that you give in this whole process. All right. Physical evidence, that's probably the main type. Okay. It refers to any material items present at the crime scene, things found on the victim, or things found in a suspect's possession. Okay. Literally, those physical items, the bullet casings, um, beer cans, you could the knife, the gun, all those things are types of physical evidence. And then the third type of evidence is what we refer to as trace, okay? And that refers to physical evidence, but it's found in such small amounts, it's kind of hard to just see it with the naked eye, okay? You have to be looking for it very specifically. So we're talking about things like a strand of hair, okay? A piece of human hair, or some fibers from clothing, or even things like skin cells. Okay, things that are very, very tiny, but are there physically. So obviously, from things like skin cells, we could get DNA. Okay, fibers from your clothing could be matched up to a specific pair of clothes that only you and you wear, and obviously your hair also leads to DNA, but it could also entail male or female. It could entail your race. It can entail something else, but I'm it's slipping my mind now. When we get to hair and fiber, don't worry, I'll cover that. Okay, so evidence collected at the crime scene. What does that do for an investigation? Okay, well, first of all, it proves that a crime has been committed. Okay, yeah, that something bad has happened here. Okay, it establishes key elements of a crime. Okay, was a gun used? Was a knife used? Was somebody robbed? Was there a car accident? Okay, it links a suspect with a crime scene or to a specific person. Okay, remember the suspect is a person thought capable of committing the crime. It establishes the identity of a victim or a suspect. That's pretty important. We want to know who did these crimes, right? So establishing their identity is very crucial. Corroborates verbal witness testimony. So, in other words, it just makes sure that these stories line up and everything adds up right and things don't stand out and seem kind of fishy. Okay. Exonerate the innocent. It proves who's innocent is supposed to actually be innocent. Guys and girls, there are people in jail right now that are serving time for a crime that they did not commit. Don't get me wrong, vice versa. There are innocent people in jail that are serving time for a crime that they didn't commit. And then lastly, it gives detectives leads to work within the cases. So they're going to take that testimonial evidence and put those pieces together and do some investigation. You're good, Brody. That's fine. I don't get your headphones, bud. Okay, Ms. Ziegler, what you heard. Yes, absolutely. What you saw, who you saw, or what you could have heard, most definitely. All right, does anybody have any questions for the types of evidence? Remember to write down the 3 types of evidence are. I'm not getting the chat, Miss Owen, so. All right, so we're going to move forward, y'all. We kind of lost the internet there for a second. All right, good job, Brody. Glad to have you back. Okay. So listen, these are just specific people that are sometimes involved with these crime scenes, okay? Obviously, the first one would be the police officers, and it the first to arrive at a crime scene. Well, yeah, because whenever you call 911, that's typically somebody takes crucial pieces of evidence from the crime scene. It's sometimes hard to tell what happened, okay, or how many people were involved, or it makes it a lot harder to figure out what happened. Okay, so they have to make sure no evidence is destroyed or stolen. And then sometimes they have to detain people of interest. Okay, so they might have to detain somebody that's suspected of committing the crime, or they might have to detain somebody that's just super angry and frustrated. And before they hurt themselves or somebody else, they have to just, detain them and put them in handcuffs for the time being. Then we have this evidence from the crime scene. Okay, the next person is the district attorney. That's a short term for that's the DA. I'm sorry. Am I still kind of lagging? Here, I'm gonna plug into Ethernet. Maybe that'll work good for us. You don't have to write this down. Just listen to this. All right, so I've just plugged up to the Ethernet. Is everybody able to see my screen and everything still? Just type yes in the chat for me. Okay, awesome. Thank y'all. Okay, so the district attorney, okay, the DA, and that person is often present only to help determine if a search warrant is required to proceed, and the DA will obtain those search warrants from a judge. Obviously, sometimes we have to get into a suspect's house and try to find physical evidence or trace evidence and use that against them to solve the crime, okay? To solve this case and bring everything together, bring closure to the family, things like that. Okay, then we have the medical examiner. Okay, notice that's in parentheses. It says if a homicide, okay, which means a murder has taken place. Okay, so the medical examiner may or may not be present, but their main job is to determine the cause of death. Okay, so another word for them. Okay, so and they're going to um, give the cause of death through an autopsy. They're going to figure out how this person passed away and try to give you a time frame of when they passed away. All very crucial pieces of evidence. All right. Then we have some specialists, okay? People like the forensic entomologist. Okay, those are people that study the life cycle of bugs. Okay, obviously this is kind of a little unpleasant to think of, but whenever you pass away, you decay. Okay, especially if you're not embalmed and go through the actual whole process where they try to preserve you. Okay, whenever you have a funeral and there's somebody there in the casket, that person's been embalmed. Okay, and they're not really going to decay like you would if you were just thrown out. So they have to determine how long somebody's been there by the life cycles of the bugs and the things that they find on the victim. Okay. So a very specific cases, but obviously cases that have been needed and solved in the past. Okay, we have anthropologists. Okay, those are people that study bones. We have the psychologists, people that study the mind. Okay, and these people may be called in if evidence requires a very specific expert. Okay, go right ahead. And then the last type of personnel is the detectives. Okay, it says they interview witnesses and consult with the CSI unit. They investigate the crime by following the leads provided by witnesses and the physical evidence. So they go off of the leads provided witnesses or things that are determined from the physical evidence. Okay, so say that they found a gun at the scene of the crime. Well, they're going to take that gun back to the crime laboratory and dust that thing and make sure that there's no fingerprints on it. First of all, they're probably going to make sure that the gun's not stolen. Okay, if it is, they'll figure out who had the gun stolen from them, who that person thinks they might have stolen the gun. And as you can see, the more questions you ask, the more leads you potentially. A lot of y'all having the lagging issue, or is most of y'all doing pretty good? Okay. Can y'all hear me? Yep. Yes. Okay, good. All right, y'all, we're going to move on. We don't have, but I think 1 or 2 slides left. Okay. These are some things that I will want you to write down. Okay. So write down just the step 1, interview, step 2, examine, step 3, document, step 4, process. Okay. Don't write all of those sentences underneath those things. Just write the bold black steps for me. Okay. Step 1, interview, step 2, examine. Okay. This is crime scene protocol. Okay. So this is what these people do. Okay, these people associated with crime scenes, this is what they do when they first get to the crime scene. Okay, so the very first thing they do is they're going to start interviewing people. They're going to start asking questions. I'm going to go to the chat for just a second.
Did I write it? Oh, okay. I wrote it.
Oh, okay. Me and Miss Owens got you. We're double working, y'all. Okay, so just write that down for me, and I'm going to cover these steps with y'all while you're writing. Okay, so the first step of the investigation when investigating a crime scene is to interview the first officer at the scene or the victim to determine what allegedly happened, perhaps what crime took place, and how was the crime committed. Okay, so in other words, the police officers are going to get there and they're just going to start asking some questions, figure out what's going on, who's all involved, is anybody hurt, things like that. Okay, notice it says this information may not be factual information. Okay, so in other words, they've been lied to. Okay, what they were told wasn't the truth, but it will still give the investigators a place to start. Okay, and guys and girls, you have to realize, okay, these people do this for a living. Okay, they know what to look for in people's demeanor, okay, their facial expressions, things like that. They can tell when you're lying. Okay, not only off of your actual demeanor and how you act when you lie, but the story itself will start to fall apart very quickly if it's not true. Okay, they're going to investigate what you tell them. That's part of their job, and they'll know very quickly whether or not it's the truth. And then if it comes back as a lie, well, then that just looks really bad on you. Either you're trying to protect somebody or you're probably trying to protect yourself. Okay, so just keep those things in mind. Okay, step 2 is examine. Okay, so we're just going to take a step back and look at this stuff. The second step of the investigation, which will help identify possible evidence. So we're trying to do things like identify the point of entry and the point of exit. Okay, that's not just necessarily with a bullet. Okay, that could be in somebody's home. Okay, a burglar broke in the front door and they went out the side door. Okay, and then they outline the general layout of the crime scene. So they just kind of get a basic overview and they examine the area they determine to be the crime scene. Step 3, they're going to document. Okay, it involves creating a pictorial record. So they're just going to take pictures of the crime scene. They might have to do some rough sketches to demonstrate the layout of the crime scene, or they might have to do some sketches from the witness testimony to determine what the suspect may look like. Okay, that's called a facial composite. And whenever they do that, they typically rely on the public to help them identify that person. Okay, so you would see something like that on the news. They would say, this is so and so. suspected of committing this crime. We need your help to help identify him or bring him to justice. Okay, so they would then broadcast that on the local news, and then hopefully they would start getting some more leads. And then lastly, the last step is to process it all. Okay, the crime scene technician will process the crime scene for evidence. It is the crime scene technician's responsibility to identify, evaluate, and collect physical evidence from the crime scene for further analysis at the crime laboratory. So they're just going to gather up all that information, all that evidence, once it's been documented, and they're going to take it back to the crime laboratory, and they're going to do further studies on it. Okay, and we have to remember that that's a very timely process. The quicker, the better, because you have to imagine, think about there being tire tracks or footprints or something like that out in the dirt. Okay, well, this time of year especially, we get a lot of afternoon thunderstorms, so it could literally wash away evidence within just 24 hours. So it's very, very crucial that these things are done quickly before the evidence is lost or destroyed. Okay, we're almost done. Just bear with me. You're probably not going to like this next slide, but what this mainly does is it just breaks down all, well, not even all, okay, several of the specific departments that some of these specialists work in and some of the fields that they specialize in. Okay, so things like drug chemistry. Okay, those people are going to determine the presence of things like alcohol and drugs in a person's system. Okay, microscopy. Okay, microscopic identification and comparison of evidence. So they're going to take evidence from the crime scene, things like hairs and fibers, and try to prove that they belong to a specific person or that they came from a very specific place. Toxicology. Okay, test body fluids and tissues to determine the presence of drugs and poisons. Latent prints, that the identification and comparison of fingerprints or other hidden impressions from sources like feet, shoes, ears, lips, tread on vehicle tires, your teeth, tool marks, all kind of things could be used as impression evidence. Okay, ballistics, which is just the study of bullets and ammunition. Okay, and questioned documents, examination of documents to compare things like handwriting, ink, paper, and other characteristics that would help identify its origin. Okay, so some of these are actually going to be whole units that we study, okay, especially ballistics, the latent prints. Okay, we're going to have a whole unit on that itself. Okay, so we're nearing the end. And the last thing that I want to end on with y'all is that I want to show you, no, you do not need to write all those. No, absolutely not. That would be very cruel of me. So no, you don't have to write those down. But the last thing that I want to do is that I want to show you, okay, you can write them. That's completely up to you. Just know that this PowerPoint is left up in your resources in our classroom under week 2. So the next slide, I'm going to show you a mock crime scene. Okay, mock meaning fake. So it was staged. Okay, but it's used to help train up CSI people. Okay, crime scene investigation people that are trying to join on specific forces. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to study the picture for about 30 seconds before you even start trying to point out things. Okay, so just look at the picture. Look at the foreground. Look at the background. Take in as many details as you possibly can. Okay, the term I like to use is your observational skills. Okay, build up those observational skills and notice things that other people might overlook. Okay, you have to think sometimes cases are solved with just a single piece of hair. Okay, so it's hard sometimes just to find a piece of hair on the floor of your bathroom. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to show you this. Now, whenever I show you, like I said, take about 30 seconds to just study it. And then what I want you to do in the chat is I want you to type specific things that stand out to you and things that you would collect as an investigator. Okay, so tell me the things that you would investigate or collect as evidence from this case. And then as a class, we're going to try to put the pieces together and figure out what happened. Okay, so study this picture for 30 seconds, then start telling me the things that you would collect from this crime scene.